Danse, hello, bonjour, Anine, hi, my name is Janelle Puopskonis. I am the founder and chief game maker for my company called Niched Up Games. We are a social enterprise that has developed board games and card games and other educational tools and go into learning spaces to not only teach about Indigenous culture, history, knowledges, and ways of knowing, but we use healing tools like laughter and storytelling and sharing circles to not only build relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, but we go about empowering people so that we can be the differences we need to make here in the world, but also here in Canada. A little bit more about Niched Up Games. We have developed tools like board games and card games and education kits, and we will be going on sale in 2018, so that's really exciting. We're a new startup. I'm still a young person. I'm a young Indigenous mother, and I'm based out of Saskatoon, and I'm really excited to get going with that. But today I'm here to answer a few questions that our friends at Catalyst X has kind of proposed to us as young entrepreneurs and young social innovators. One of the questions is, how do you decide your rates and your prices for your time and your products? And the other question was, what are some of the few financial things that we wish we knew for when we're just starting off in entrepreneurship? Now, to start with the first question, deciding rates is a bit challenging. It took me, I guess, maybe 2 years, over the last 2 years, to kind of come up with a good solid number that I am comfortable with. Now, I need you to consider when you're thinking about pricing, what went into the product and service to have it come to that amount. One of the things you need to consider for that are, your time you've dedicated to research and development. For Niched Up Games, to this Christmas actually, we developed this 7 Christmases ago, when we were, didn't have anything that was very Indigenous in terms of games. With all of our cousins coming to visit, and there was nothing really out there, so that was how our idea was born. But it took 7 years to get to this point where we are able and comfortable in using it in different education systems. So now when you are considering what you've put into it, consider how much time from like when you started thinking about this to now. 7 years is a significant amount of time for me, so I keep that in mind when I'm considering my pricing for different groups. Another thing you need to consider is all the materials that went into it. For me, it was a lot of paper, a lot of, using the computer and printing and reprinting and cutting and pasting and to go through all the game prototypes, you need to make sure you consider all the materials, whether it be, paper materials or like the materials that you used within a computer. Those are materials that you have to consider in what you're charging, as well as your overhead. So the power that I used, the time that I dedicated to it, the rent of the space, paying your volunteers to help you out. I know they're volunteering, but you have to show people they're valuable and useful and that you appreciate them. So making sure you put those into your costs as well, for all the free coffee that you've given your free volunteers and interns, all the freebies that you gave them, all that's needs to be considered. And then once you put all those numbers and all the time and all your value into it, that's when you can possibly come up with a number. And that's a hard, difficult formula. So I'm sorry I don't have a direct equation for you to follow in terms of like what you need to get your final price, but you need to make sure you're valued. You spent probably a number of years going through high school, college, university programming, leadership programming, etc., to build yourself to get to where you are. That's something that should be considered into your price as well. The amount of experience and time. For example, and I can only speak for here in Saskatchewan, I mean, if you're like a spoken word artist or a presenter, I would say like just an example, $150 an hour. That is something that you can consider for the whole hour. Just an example, it could be $150. But also when you're charging other groups, ensure that you also charge, like when I'm thinking about the invoice, charge the service fee, charge a 1 or 2 hour prep time, because definitely it takes time for you to get to the site and to get back, to prepare your materials, to reprint things, to read up on more research, etc., to keep your information most up to date. So definitely charge a couple 1 to 2 hours prep time for that. If you're going out of city, charge for the mileage and go to your government rates, and like for example it's 0.445 here in Saskatchewan, and it's much higher in larger provinces, etc. And it's in charge, like if you take the whole day, it takes your whole day to go do this one workshop. Ensure that you're charging ensure you're charging that time. So if it's 3 meals that it costs you to get there and back home, make sure you're charging the full rates. Again, refer to your provincial rates. If you want a baseline, go to the province of Ontario, province of Saskatchewan. You know, they have a website that'll let you know how much the standard mileage is, and definitely use that as your bar. You can go higher, you can go lower. Again, it's up to you and how much you think you're valued. And that's another thing that to get into the second question is a few financial things that I wish I knew. And when I first started doing service-based work with schools, with communities, with universities, I would be like, well, what are you suggesting? What do you think it's worth? And of course they would give me a number and what they could afford. But also I had places like a university say to me, you know, we'll charge you $25 an hour. I was young, as a little bit more naive, and of course I needed the money and the work at that time, so I accepted it, not fully realizing I could charge 6 times that much more and be valued at that price, 6 times more than the $25 an hour. So knowing how much time you put into it, knowing how much education you put into it, knowing how much materials and how much support, all of that needs to come into consideration. And I know it's a financial amount, and that's not what your life is valued at, but keep that into consideration when you're thinking about what you're worth, more than just financial. You're, as a young person, as someone who wants to make a difference in the world, you are worth a lot. Please keep that in mind. Another financial thing is once I knew my worth and also I knew myself a bit better, I knew that I really loved and I really did well on projects where I could work on my own. Like going through university, I liked the team-based projects, but I knew that I did my best work when I was on my own, but still able to bounce ideas off in a community. So knowing that I worked really well on my own, that I was a self-starter, that I knew that I could take risks on my own. What are some other things that I considered? Whereas I knew what kind of work I did under a higher, we'll say higher power, like under a supervisor. I bloomed more as an individual when I was given, you know, this is what you need to do it. And I had the freedom and the creativity to do that on my own. So I chose the route of sole proprietorship because I knew that I wanted to do this. And even though I had my community of people there, I knew that I could do this really well on my own. So I chose sole proprietorship, and that is just a choice that I've made, and I don't always encourage it because some projects are really big and really huge. So I definitely consider, like, what is the amount of risk that you want to take? What is the how well do you work in a team? can you handle that kind of risk? Like if with a partnership, for example, you really need to make sure that the other person is somebody who's not only worthy of your partnership, is somebody that you can vibe with, that maybe you guys provide each other strengths that the other one doesn't. Or maybe you're both get together and you come up with really creative things, but at the same time the other person is able to give you a work plan and some structure. Also with that risk is like you guys come together and you share the profit, but you also come in and you share the cost. But also if one partner isn't living up to the other partner's standards, then there's also the risk of being a little disappointed by your partner because they didn't come through, or and you're still responsible for that partner and the work that you do. So really consider what you want to go forward with. And of course, you can go into building a corporation where you are the CEO and founder, and then you can bring more people in to be your CFOs and your chief operating officer, etc., etc. And there are pros and cons to that. So going back to what my original tip was just making sure you know yourself enough, how you do well, how you don't do well, what kind of risks you want to take, what kind of supports that you need. How you want to structure your company or your business or your nonprofit or organization is really key, because when you move into like getting into the real world of putting your idea out there, you're going to need to make sure you register your business so you're legal, but also that is a requirement for your business registration, is that what's your structure, and you really need to know that before you're able to register. Another thing that I really needed to step my game up, which I did and I do, is bookkeeping. Keeping all your receipts. Making sure that you have like an Excel spreadsheet or a software application or a banker or a financial officer who is helping you, making sure you're keeping on track on budget, making sure that you have enough to exist, and making sure that you have enough for the next thing. Because if you run out of money every time that you have an idea, I mean, you're going to be stagnant. You're going to be, what is the word? You're going to be in one spot for a while. So let's say you run out of money in May and you have another idea, but you have to write a grant. Now, grants take a little while to write. Grants take a little while to get decided on upon when it goes into, and then it takes a while to get paid. So if you like finished in May and you needed money in June, then you might have to wait June, July, August, and maybe even September to get your funding to come through. And then again, it just depends on that. But knowing where you're at financially is part of the bookkeeping. And then also understanding those numbers, you will be able to forecast what you're able to do in the next few months, or if you're going to be a little bit rocky, or if you need to supplement by doing something. Knowing your numbers, it's a tedious task at times. For me as a sole proprietor, it's challenging, but it's so necessary, because if I run out of money, it affects my life. It affects my livelihood. It affects how much I eat, how much coffee I get that week, you know. So that's a really important fact to know. And then I think the last piece is setting up. It depends on how much money you have going into it. I just graduated from school in June. Like, I went to college. I graduated in June and I've been full-time ever since. And setting up, I wish I understood how to do that a little bit better. Setting up, like, okay, I'm going to work for myself. That was my goal, and I'm doing it, and I keep doing it. But one thing I didn't consider was like setting up where am I going to be working from? I know I go out into different spaces and learning spaces and teach in those spaces, but where's my home? So, you know, considering those facts as you go into it, where are you going to put your office? Are you going to work out of someone's home? If you're going to work out of somebody's home, do you have enough materials like a desk, a light? Are a computer, a printer, notebooks, paper, etc., etc. Like understanding that you need those things ahead of time is really important. What are some of those things that you need? And also maybe your community can also help you out. One of those things that I say is that if you don't know someone who has something that you need, then it shows us that we need to grow our network. Like for example, an organization wanted to bring in an elder, and you know, they asked me to ask the elder, but at the same time I didn't find that as a sustainable option, because it's going to always continuously be me asking someone else to do something, and that network wasn't there. So that's something that I really encourage. Like if you need someone who's helping in screen printing or 3D printing or website building or etc., etc., then it's a sign that we need to grow our networks a little bit. And how that relates to finance is that those people have resources and opportunities and networks within themselves, and by networking we can promote ourselves, promote our businesses, and also promote our get out our needs to the community, and in hopes that they could find a way to help us get that for ourselves. And that's, I guess, maybe the last piece that I want to share is this, the importance of a network. The importance of getting out of ourselves and our comfort zones and growing as people, and being able to, you know, pitch your idea to someone, and knowing yourself, knowing your structure, and knowing where you are financially, as I mentioned, will definitely play key roles in developing those relationships and asks to different peoples within the community. So I know I said a lot, and I appreciate that Catalyst X has come and asked me for some knowledge, and I really appreciate that. Keep an eye out for Niched Up Games. www.nichedoutgames.com is our website. Yeah, so I really appreciate the opportunity, and I wish everyone a great day. Thank you.